Hi, everybody. Brad Truax here, once again from Eastman Woodlands and Wildlife Committee. Today, we're going to do an update on a presentation we've done previously on bobcats, and we'll actually talk a little bit about lynx as well. So again, bobcats are members of the family and includes lynx and cougars. The latter are also known as pumas, catamounts, or mountain lions. Bobcats are the most common wildcat that we see here in New Hampshire and Vermont. Some Canada lynx have been spotted in northern parts of New Hampshire and recently in Vermont, but we've not had any actual proof that we've had any cougars or mountain lions here. There have been plenty of claims of people seeing cougars and mountain lions in New Hampshire, but there's been no confirmed physical evidence that they've actually really been here. Bobcats are the smallest members of that family. They tend to weigh about 20 pounds, and they average about 30 inches in body length, though the females are a little bit smaller, usually about 14 pounds. So they're probably not much more than twice the size of a common house cat. The largest bobcat seen in the U.S. weighed 52 pounds, so they could be quite big. They can stand almost 18 inches high, and they have two key features, their tails and their ears. Their tails are very short. They're bobbed, which is where the name bobcats comes from. The tail's roughly 4 to 7 inches long compared to the longer tails seen on the larger cats of the family. And the tail has a white underside. They have ears that have very characteristic black tufts that stick out of the top of their ears. So again, there are several things that influence the size: genetics, availability of prey, climate, and environmental conditions. Genetics is probably the biggest determinant of the bobcat size, but the bobcats tend to be larger when there's lots of prey around and the diversity of the prey is increased. Colder climates also tend to support larger body masses, and that's probably a mammalian adaptation to conserving heat. And bobcats, again, typically weigh between 15 and 35 pounds, though 20 pounds is about the average. And once again, the females are smaller than the males. They may weigh about 14 pounds. Again, here's two pictures of the bobcats. Again, the bobtail, which you see right here, is shorter than you would expect to see on a mountain lion. Once again, there's a little black tip, but the underside is white. And then the black ear tufts are very characteristic. They stick out at the very top of the ears. And note that they also have kind of a what's called a ruff. It almost looks like sideburns along the side of its face. So again, bobcats often walk very slowly as they stalk their prey, but they can run as fast as 30 miles an hour. They may run like a rabbit with their hind feet in the same place as their front feet when they're actually kind of bounding after prey. And they can also climb trees in order to hunt or to hide or to sleep. They've been said to leap up to 10 to 12 feet. They're also very good swimmers, though they're not particularly fond of water. And their wide padded paws allow them to stalk prey very silently. They have very keen vision, hearing, and a sense of smell, in addition to their ability to slowly stalk and leap. And these characteristics make them excellent hunters. So again, bobcats blend into the environment. Bobcats camouflage fur makes it hard for both prey and enemies to be able to see it. And the fur changes color depending on the season. In the warmer months, the fur is kind of a golden brown color with some black stripes and spots. But during the winter, it becomes more grayish and it tends to match the color of the dead plants around it. So again, bobcats like stone walls. We often see them on top of stone walls or around them. And that's because small mammals, which are their favorite prey, tend to inhabit those stone walls. And they'll also use those stone walls as elevated corridors when they're hunting. But note here how the grayish coat of the bobcat in winter tends to blend quite well with the stone walls and with the branches that are now bare and have lost their leaves. Bobcats also like elevated objects. We showed them on top of a stone wall before, but we often see them walking on fallen logs. Here's one that's walking on a large log that's fallen over the water. Bobcat breeding season is right around the corner. It's between mid-January and early February, and the male and female are usually together only for a few short days at most. They don't form any lasting bonds. The gestation period is 50 to 70 days, averaging about 62 days. And a typical litter is 1 to 5 kittens that are born in May. The litter is often in a daybed that's covered by thick vegetation. And a couple of years ago, in early May, we were with some friends in North Carolina, and they saw what they thought was a small domestic kitten under a bush, only to later later see a mother bobcat return to that kitten. So where do bobcats den? Well, they make their dens for breeding, storing food, protection from predators, and protection from the weather. And the dens are also for rest, sleep, and play, particularly for the kittens. They especially like to make their living space in rock formations and caves. But they may also den in a hollow tree or a log or a brush pile. And they often have multiple dens. So again, they particularly like rocky dens. They like rock formations, caves, in order for living. And this protects them from predators and from adverse weather conditions. So here you see a bobcat basically getting out of the snowstorm by going into this rocky crevice. Bobcats may be on the prowl year round. As we noted earlier, their coat becomes a lighter gray that blends in with the bare plants in winter. So they're very well camouflaged from their prey. And they don't mind the snow, but they don't particularly like deep snow. So they often stay sheltered during heavy snowstorms. Canada lynx, on the other hand, have larger padded feet that help them walk on top of the snow much more easily than bobcats can. The presence of Canada lynx actually puts bobcats, therefore, at a disadvantage. So again, as mammals, the mothers do feed the kittens milk, but as the kittens are weaned, the mother will feed them meat that she brings back to them. And the mother will also sometimes bring them live animals so they can learn to hunt. And the offspring become independent at roughly age 10 to 12 months. A bobcat's typical lifespan is about 12 years. And typical range for a male bobcat in a vast forest is between 14 and 25 square miles. So it's a pretty big range. They may travel up to 7 miles each night. For a female, the average range is smaller, usually 6 to 12 square miles. And depending on the richness of the habitat and the diversity and availability of prey, it could be considerably smaller than that. And the amount of available prey is what largely determines the habitat. So bobcats will protect their territory through scent marking with urine, feces, and anal gland secretions. And it's unclear how many bobcats we actually have here at Eastman. The one that's most commonly seen is about twice the size of a domestic cat, so it's probably a female. But we've seen new tracks at least a mile apart on the same morning, so it's quite likely we have multiple bobcats here at Eastman. So what do bobcats eat? They're strictly carnivores. Their prey consists of mice, rats, squirrels, rabbits, hares, small birds, grouse, even small reptiles and amphibians. You may see them around your bird feeders in winter, but it's not for the seeds. It's really for the small animals that might be feeding on those seeds. They'll seldom attack animals that are bigger than themselves, but attacks on deer have actually been seen, usually very small, sick, or young deer. And they'll often stalk their prey from a distance, then slowly creep up and pounce on them, killing them with a single bite to the neck. They rarely attack humans, unlike some of their larger relatives like mountain lions. So here's a video of a bobcat here at Eastman, courtesy of Amy Hoffman. You're going to watch first that he or she will be sitting on its haunches. Then you'll see a slow, stealthy gait. Note the paw placement as he walks. They are what we call diagonal walkers, meaning they move one side of the body and then the other side of the body. And you'll happen to notice there's probably a bird feeder in this picture, and this bobcat was probably hunting underneath that bird feeder. So there he or she is, basically sitting on his haunches, doing a little bit of sniffing. Now he's getting ready to move.
Oh wow, I've got it video. I've got it.
Very stealthy, low gait. There's a bird feeder that he's under. Moving over. Very slow and stealthy. Okay, bobcats also scent mark. So in this video, you're going to see the bobcat both leaving some scent and smelling some scent. There he goes back down. There he or she is sniffing at some scent. Now turns around and actually leaves some scent on his own. And now he's going to move off. So bobcats have very few predators. Particularly young bobcats might be vulnerable to eagles, great horned owls, big hawks, or to coyotes, fishers, foxes, and bears. And occasionally a male bobcat may kill some of the young bobcats, but adult bobcats are usually only killed by fishers and humans. There was a significant drop in the bobcat population in the early 2000s, and that coincided with the introduction of a new rat poison. Fortunately, that rat poison has subsequently been banned. And the other major threat to bobcats is obviously automobiles. So bobcats do have competitors. Canada lynx compete with the bobcats for similar prey. So the bobcats tend to be less plentiful in areas where lynx are present. And other competitors for similar prey are the fox and the coyote. So again, bobcats are solitary animals. They are crepuscular, meaning they're most active at dusk and dawn. But they'll hunt any time of day or night, depending on whether prey is available and how hungry they are. At Eastman, we're most likely to see them during the day, but that's probably just because we see them better in the light. We're actually more likely to capture them on game cams at nighttime. So again, here's an example. Here's a game cam video that we captured a bobcat at Heath Forest in here at Eastman. This bobcat was crossing a beaver dam at night, out on the hunt. Bobcats can climb trees if that's where their next meal is. We don't see their retractable claws when we're looking at bobcat tracks, but those claws come out and allow them to climb trees. So watch this bobcat climb a tree to catch a squirrel.
If only he could get to it. It's 6 meters up. At last, a squirrel. Not much, but enough to keep him going.
Pretty impressive. Bobcats are usually silent, but they can produce growls, hisses, and spitting noises that they use to defend their territory. But bobcats are cats, so they may purr and rarely meow. And sometimes they'll also make a high-pitched screaming sound, particularly when they're looking for a mate. They'll also do a, quote, cough bark that seems to be unique to the bobcat. And they'll do a squall or a yowl if the bobcat is in pain. And they'll also do caterwauling. Okay, here's a good example of a bobcat caterwauling. And this would be used primarily for mating during breeding season.
So the sound that Bobcat is making is known as caterwauling.
What exactly is he saying, though? By definition, that is a shrill howling or wailing noise, and that like that of a cat right there. So some sort of communication going on.
I posted this on Facebook, and some people are saying that's the sound I hear when I take my morning walk.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So
early morning
keep your
walk.
eyes out for one of these animals.
Pretty impressive. Bobcat tracks, if you remember, we've talked about the difference between feline and canine tracks. The feline tracks are here on the right, the canines on the left. Canines have claw marks that show, and they have this negative X pattern. Sorry about that. Negative X pattern. Also, the heel pad has usually a single lobe at the front and two lobes at the back. On the other hand, the feline, we typically do not see the claw marks, and that's because their claws are retractable. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes we will see their claws in a print, but usually we don't. And again, they don't have that X-like pattern. Instead, they have kind of a either an inverted C shape, or some people talk about an H shape. But here on the heel pad, there are two lobes on the front and three lobes on the back. In addition, the feline track tends to be more round compared to the canine track, which tends to be a little more oval. And this is just showing again in a little bit more detail the difference between feline and canine tracks. So here's a bobcat track in the mud. Once again, you see 4 toes up here. We do not see any claws. And we see this kind of inverted C shape or roughly an H shape. Here we see these 2 lobes on the front of the heel pad and 3 lobes on the back. Here it is in the snow. So once again, 4 toes, no claw tracks showing, 2 lobes on the front of the heel pad, 3 on the back. And here we actually see a halo that's around that. And the halo is probably from the fur that they grow, particularly in the wintertime. And once again, here is showing most of the time the bobcat tends to be what we call a diagonal walker. That means that limbs on one side of the body move at the same time, then the other side. So that's known as diagonal walking. There is a difference in size and other characteristics between the male and the female. So again, here the front foot is at the bottom and the back foot is at the top in these pictures. But the male tracks here on the left tend to be larger. The toes tend to be somewhat rounder. And compared to the female on the right, where the toes are smaller and they tend to be more oval shaped, a little bit more narrow. And the space between the there's negative space between the heel pad and the toes tends to be a little bit bigger in the female. So again, here's an interesting track pattern. This was from a bobcat actually in my backyard. You see right along here, and I'm sorry, this was taken through a screen door, so you get some artifact here. But if you look here, it almost looks like he's walking in a straight line. These tracks almost appear to be linear. And that's what we call direct registration. And that's where the animal, the hind foot of the animal usually lands directly on top of where the front foot had been. And direct registration is a pattern that many animals use, and it's largely to conserve energy. Bobcats often sit on their haunches while they're stalking prey. We saw that previous video where it started out with the bobcat on its haunches. So here's a typical bobcat sitting on its haunches. And you may actually see evidence of this in the snow. So here's what we call a bobcat sit down. And again, here you see the back paws here. Here's where the haunches were, and here's where the 2 front paws were. So again, if you see bobcat tracks, look around. You may also see a bobcat sit down. Bobcat scat tends to be cylindrical and highly segmented. You see this has multiple segments. It's about an inch in diameter, and it's often deposited in a scrape. The animal actually scrapes with its paws and then either urinates or defecates in that same area. So that's what you're seeing here. This was a scrape left by his paws, and then it left scat in that scrape. So what do you do if you see a bobcat? Yeah, they're cute, but don't approach them. They're still wild animals. And make sure small pets and children don't go near them. They've been known to attack small pets like cats and small dogs, but they seldom approach humans. If one did approach a human, that unusual behavior should suggest that it might be rabid. And in the rare event you were attacked by a bobcat, you should seek medical attention immediately. Do you remember the rule of thumb that we talked about? So what if you're looking out in the forest and you encounter an animal like a bobcat? Well, the Eco Explore website put out this rule of thumb, which I think is really neat. Basically, you hold your hand out, put your thumb between you and the animal. And if you can't fully block out that animal, you're probably too close, so move away. So if you want more information about bobcats, here are a few good links that you can go to when you get a chance. So how about Canada lynx? There are Canada lynx in New Hampshire and also some in Vermont. They've been documented in the northern parts of New Hampshire, mainly in the White Mountain area. And again, a Canada lynx has also recently been sighted in several places in Vermont. Canada lynx are common in Maine and in Canada, so in more northern areas. They once were common in New Hampshire, but they were thought to be locally extinct since the early 2000s. But then in the fall of 2017, 4 Canada lynx kittens were videotaped in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. And documentation of the kittens identifies these as a resident population as opposed to a transient lynx that's just walking through the area. So that breeding population confirms that New Hampshire has the habitat and the prey that are available to support a lynx. They are considered an endangered species. So New Hampshire actually has special trapping regulations. And particularly there's a lynx protection zone in the northern and White Mountain areas. And that's largely to protect the endangered species. So again, here's Canada lynx that are saying it's free here in New Hampshire. Once again, this is in Pittsburgh. And there's lynx in Vermont. They've recently been seen there. This video shows
Vermont Fish and Wildlife says residents are continuing to see a rare Canada lynx. Over a dozen sightings confirm it's the same animal.
It was just neat to see.
Canada lynx are seen broadly throughout Canada and Alaska, according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But one of these large felines has made its way to the Green Mountain State.
I think it's a conservation success story.
Bree Furphy is the fur bearer project leader with Vermont Fish and Wildlife. She says the 16 images and videos they received are likely the same animal.
All of a sudden, we're starting to see one that is being seen very often, I would say, over the course of the last 45 days or so.
Vermont Fish and Wildlife says the first confirmed sighting was in Rutland County back in August. The latest sighting indicates it made it to Addison County.
So again, they're clearly present on rare occasions in both New Hampshire and Vermont. So Canada lynx are about 3 feet long, 20 inches tall, and they weigh 15 to 35 to 30 pounds. So they're about 2 to 3 times the size of the average house cat. So they're considerably bigger than the bobcat. They have very prominent black ear tufts and usually long sideburn style hair on the sides of their face. Their fur is quite thick. It's light brown or gray with light black spots, and it insulates them very well in cold habitats. And they have long, strong legs and short tails with black tips. Now, remember we said that the bobcat has a white area under its tail. The lynx tends to be more of a full black tip. And they have very huge furry paws, up to 10 centimeters wide. And these actually work like snowshoes. They distribute the lynx's weight so it's able to move very well on the snow. And Canada lynx thrive in coniferous forests near rocky areas or bogs or swamps. And their diet is really heavily reliant on snowshoe hares. Lynx love to walk across logs, and they're quite territorial, and they tend to be solitary. They're very good swimmers, climbers, and hunters. Here's a Canada lynx. Note the very long black tufts on its ears. They're usually a bit longer than those of the bobcat. And the fur along the sides of their face resembles sideburns. And a very thick fur that helps insulate them when they're in the cold habitat that they're used to. And their fur may be gray or more brownish like this one. One of the characteristics is these huge paws, which really allow them to walk on top of the snow. So it's much easier for them to walk than bobcats. Their rear legs are longer than their front legs. So this gives rise to this characteristic pattern where their butt is much higher than their head. So their back tends to slope forward. They have very muscular back legs and they use long black tufts on their ears. And again, the black tip to the tail. Tail actually a bit shorter than that of the typical bobcat. So again, lynx versus a bobcat. The lynx is larger and has bigger paws and a stooped posture. Remember again, posture with it looks like it's leaning forward. The tail is shorter on the Canada lynx, and the tail tip is all black as opposed to the bobcat tail, which you can see is very white on the bottom and just a little bit black at the tip. And the ear tufts, again, are longer on the lynx. And the bobcat's fur tends to be more reddish brown, particularly in the summertime, with distinct spots. So again, here, this video shows some of those differences in that lynx that was recently seen in Vermont.
What distinguishes a lynx from a bobcat?
The lynx has a hunched back, so it's like angled backwards. You'll also notice really gigantic feet that act like snowshoes in deep snow. One of the key differences that we always look for is in the tail. So if it's black all the way around, so on the top and the bottom of the tail, then it's a lynx. But if it has any white on the underneath of the tail, then it would be a bobcat.
Canada lynx are very territorial and they're usually solitary. But here's a group of lynx that were actually seen in New Hampshire. Unusual to see multiple lynx together. So what do Canada lynx eat? Well, about 75% of their diet is made up of snowshoe hares. They'll also eat birds and meadow voles, squirrels, carrion, and sometimes larger animals like deer, or if they're way up north, caribou. And they'll often store leftover kill by covering it with snow. Canada lynx are usually solitary hunters, though sometimes a mother and her young will hunt together. And they usually hunt at twilight or at night, and they'll stalk their prey before pouncing on it. And they can climb trees, and they'll often wait on a branch for passing prey. Canada lynx usually mate between February and March. And 2 months after mating, the female will give birth to 1 to 6 kittens. Average litter is usually 2 to 4 kittens. And the kittens are fully weaned at about 3 months, but they'll start eating meat as soon as 1 month old. The kittens will stay with their mother for the first year. And once they leave their mother, the young lynxes tend to stay together for a short period of time. And ultimately, the male and female tend to have separate ranges. So lynx tracks are typical feline tracks in that the claws don't show. They're bigger and rounder than the typical bobcat tracks, and they often have a big halo due to the very large fur on their paws. Here you see a very big halo. And the back foot usually follows the front foot, but they don't always walk in a straight line. So here, kind of crooked. And again, the lynx tracks tend to be shallower than bobcat tracks, and that's because remember the lynx have these big snowshoe-like paws that allow them to walk on top of the snow, whereas the bobcat tends to sink deeper into the snow. So again, bobcats and lynx also scent mark. The Canada lynx will scent mark by spraying urine or scatting. This video shows the Canada lynx spraying urine on a stump. Now we're going to see the same thing in slow motion. Going to briefly stop and spray on that stump. So he's scent marking there. Okay, they will also scent mark by scraping their paws and depositing urine or scat or both onto that scrape. And they may also rub their head, neck, and cheeks on objects to leave scent. So we'll see both of these in this video. So here he's basically scraping. Now he's going to urinate into that scrape. Okay, now here's one that's coming down, and you're going to see the head rubbing, head and neck and cheeks rubbing as a form of scent marking. Pretty incredible that somebody captured a video of that. Okay, how about what's going to happen with Canada lynx in the future? And though we've spotted some Canada lynx recently in New Hampshire and Vermont, don't expect them to become very common here. And that's because their main food source is snowshoe hares. And the snowshoe hares have really been struggling due to climate change. When there's less snow cover here in New Hampshire and Vermont in recent years, there's a camouflage mismatch for the snowshoe hares. Now they're often white when the ground is still dark, and that makes them more vulnerable to predators. So they're now mostly seen in the northern parts of New Hampshire and Vermont. And we can expect with continued climate change that they're going to be driven, both the snowshoe hares and the Canada lynx are going to be driven further north in the future. So that's a little bit about bobcats and lynx. We hope that that's been valuable for you, and come back sometime.